No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
Something is about to break.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 009 of About to Break. I'm your host, Taylor Hughes, and this week I'm joined by the incredible Mark Kalin. Mark is the creative director of the Broadway show Illusionists Turn of the Century. It's the highest grossing magic show in Broadway history, and he's been a part of the Illusionists, which is the largest touring magic show ever, for about 5 years now. Beyond that, he and his wife Ginger have an incredible show that they performed in theme parks and casinos and everything you can imagine. This guy knows all about the business inside and out. I remember the first time I met Mark. I was just a young kid. I was doing magic and trying to figure stuff out, and I had a question, and I reached out to him. I shot him an email from my AOL email address, and I got a response back. And since that time, Mark has continued to speak into my life and encourage me and just share his wisdom and his experience. And I know that you guys are going to love hearing from him. If you are not a magician, there's tons of information here about performing arts and creativity and how to stay true to yourself. And if you are a magician, just start taking notes. Ladies and gentlemen, the incredible Mark Kalin. When this podcast first came up, I immediately made a list of people that I wanted to have these conversations with, and some of them are because I've had conversations like this with them that have just been encouraging to me and helpful in my kind of discovery of art and life and how to make it all work. And Mark Kalin was one of the first names on that list. So I have to tell you this, Mark. I don't think I've ever told you this, but you know, as a magician, there's like only 5 questions you ever get asked. Can you saw my wife in half? Right. Right. Can you make my taxes disappear? Stuff like that. But one of the questions I get asked a lot is, who's your favorite magician? And hands down, I'm not just saying this because we're doing this podcast. Hands down, every time someone says, who's your favorite magician, I say Mark Kalin is the best magician.
I'm honored. That's very nice.
I've been a fan of Mark's long before we were friends and knew each other personally. And I remember seeing Carnival of Wonders, which is a show that Mark and his wife Ginger produced in Reno, Nevada. How long did you guys run that show?
Well, let's see. The very first time we ever produced a version of Carnival of Wonders, sort of the original version was called Before Your Very Eyes, and that ran in Atlantic City in 1997. Seems like a long time ago. But that got the show off the ground. We did 7 months in Atlantic City with it, and where it was able to secure a contract at that time. We were living in Vegas. Hobson, who was our business partner at the time and onstage cohort, we were all living in Vegas, but we were able to secure a contract in Reno. Came up here, did some presentations, actually spent a lot of time because we saw this as a good possible market for a place that could have a magic show. The casino market was a little more hopping then. Reno's gone through some changes. We still live here, Ginger and I.
Yeah.
But we were able to secure a 3-year contract.
Wow. And that's not something that was really happening at the time, right? I mean,
well, actually, they were on their way out. It was the only business that I knew. It's the only way we really saw to sell the show, which would be what would be called a straight buy. That means the casino, they handle everything. They provide the crew and the advertising in the room, and you produce the show, and then you're paid a certain amount of money for a certain period of time. In this case, 3 years at pretty good money. There's no risk. You know going in, as long as nothing happens to the contract,
right,
you know what you're making. But one of the things that had a profound effect over Carnival over the course of its years there at what was the Flamingo Hilton in Reno was the changing entertainment market to what is called a 2-wall or a 4-wall.
Right.
That basically, the worst case scenario of that, which is very common nowadays,
right,
is the performer goes in and you handle everything, the advertising, pay the crew, you get the ticket sales or a portion of the ticket sales. And if it fails, you're SOL, but the venue is clean and they can they haven't lost any investment.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then they've got 5 other guys knocking at their door that also want to try it out. It's not the preferred way to do business, but it's become pretty common.
Right. And this is kind of the changing landscape of definitely Las Vegas.
Yep.
People, for folks who don't understand how these type of venues work, I think they look and they see the big billboard in Vegas and they think, man, that person's made it. But some of these guys are, putting every dime they have and, maybe several 100,000 of other people's dimes into
sometimes millions.
Yeah.
People always ask me, well, what kind of deals are out there? Well, there's every kind of deal. But nowadays, the deals favor the casino because they can. It's sort of like they figured out at one point. Things just changed dramatically. At one point, you would go to a casino and they would have great food for really cheap, and there would be an amazingly good show that was not too expensive. This was, before the days of Cirque du Soleil at $150 tickets.
Right, yeah.
And the casinos made their money on the gambling, having a great product, and they bought their shows, which is what we call a straight buy. They would just be happy to pay for a great show to sort of hang their hat on. They had good restaurants and good food. But things did take a shift during the 90s and the 2000s. And they figured out that not only would they have an abundance of performers that would be happy to produce a show and take the risk, oftentimes these rooms that would normally have one show
right.
May have now, you see showrooms that have 4 or 5 shows. There's a noon show, there's a 3 p.m. show, there's a 6 p.m. They're all different, and they're all oftentimes paying to be in that room. Paying meaning that they're paying the rental of the room, and it's a terrible way to make money. It's a great way to lose money, and I'd probably say that the balance of people that try it lose their shirt and never try it again. Yeah. We've done it. We've done all kinds of deals, and we've made money.
Yeah.
But it's always a learning curve and a very painful one when it's your own money.
I think a lot of guys, they tend to gravitate toward what they idolized growing up. I remember watching you and Ginger and other performers both on stage and on television and just thinking, I want to do what those guys are doing. For someone who's looking right now and saying, I want to do an act in Vegas, what would you say, having done that, but knowing also the landscape for a performer who maybe that's the dream? What direction would you give them?
Gosh, that's really difficult to answer because it's really such a different market now. You know what? I would probably have to answer that. I'm happy to answer specifics and all of that stuff, but they all the roads kind of lead back to one place, and that is do something that you're passionate about, do something original, and be great at it.
Yeah.
And if you focus on those things, the other stuff will come.
That's so
it
good.
really is true. A lot of times our focus is in the wrong place. You really do need to sort of have, it's like driving down a 2-sided lane. You do have to have your head in a little bit of business and make smart decisions and plan ahead and see a big picture. At the same time, you've got to make sure that other road is moving forward, and that's the one that is personal growth and performance. And I can't stress enough how important it is to find in magic original magic,
right,
and an original approach to the magic.
Right.
I can tell you that people see a lot nowadays, and they have a lot coming at them, and there's nothing that is going to be more of a roadblock than to be doing the same thing that the next guy's doing.
Let's talk a little bit about this, because in magic, it's an interesting dynamic where, if you're a songwriter, you either do covers of other people's music or you write your own music.
Right.
And there's very clear difference between original singer-songwriters who make a career writing their own music and a cover band who does weddings consistently, But in magic, there's this weird thing of there is a store that you can walk into. And unlike a music store where you can't walk in and buy a guitar and immediately say, I can play the guitar, you can walk into a magic shop and walk out and say, I can do magic.
Well, in theory, I would say there's a fundamental difference between owning a magic trick or learning how a trick and and doing magic.
Right.
And, there is a hobbyist nature to it, and that is sort of what appeals to people sometimes. But as anybody would tell you that's been doing this for a very long time and had some experience, it really has to do with creating that sense of magic, how you perform, what the audience feels about you, and very important, I would say, original material. And, I think we could talk about this a little bit, because I do think that a lot of times young magicians might hear the same things over and over, certain pieces of advice that sound good, but you wonder, well, what's the practicality of that? Why is that so important? Like when somebody says, well, it's important to be yourself.
Right.
Well, what does that mean? Or when somebody says, it's important to do original magic. Well, the real thing is why? Why is that so important? Does the audience really know the difference? Well, the simple fact is they do, and they can.
Yeah.
And something that feels fresh and new. There's always going to be a certain market for the same old stuff. You can do the same thing, go into a movie. You can go see a movie, and it'll pass the time. It'll be the same story, the same special effects, the same sort of predictable nature. And, to some extent, it satisfies. You say, yeah, that was, it was earth-shattering, but I enjoyed it, put a smile on my face or whatever, but I feel like I've seen that movie 20 times.
Yep.
Or 100 times.
Yep.
And then you go see something that feels fresh the moment it starts, and you're invigorated, and you're fascinated, and you're off base, and there's just no comparison.
Right.
There's just no comparison. And then from a practical standpoint in magic, I've been able to enjoy working with the Illusionists,
right,
for about going on close to 5 years now, both as a performer originally and then behind the scenes, from the standpoint of creating magic for them, bringing them performers, and casting the shows.
Yeah.
And the big dog in the room, the main guy, is Simon Painter. Always has been. He's the guy that makes the choices. He's the guy that is going to see your promo first. All he's interested in is a video he can find online, short and sweet. And I've watched Simon look at dozens and dozens of performer promo.
Yeah.
And I get this from a lot of performers. How do I get into one of the Illusionists?
Yeah.
And for whatever dozens of times I've sat with him, I know that there's literally hundreds or thousands of times he's done this over the years. And I can tell you, there's probably, let's just say he's looking for, illusionist for one of his shows, meaning somebody that does big illusions.
Right. Yep.
And I know there's an opening. I know there's a job there. I know that they're looking to fill this spot, and there might be people that I bring to the table or people that I suggest. I could tell you that there's probably a handful of illusions, 7, 8, 10. If one of those shows up, gone. He's not interested.
Yeah.
Just not interested, because he knows that everything else is going to be the same.
Right. Yeah.
It's not worth his time. It's an immediate signal that he knows not interested. And, some of those things are going to be the Losender table.
Right. Yeah.
And because not that it's not a great trick. Everybody does it because it's an amazingly good trick, and it's practical, and it makes the performance look great. Kevin James' Snowstorm, a great trick. But this and a handful of other things, Sub-Trunk, all these things that all of us would be able to count off on our fingers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I can tell you that most of those tricks, or some combination of those tricks, are in 80% of the illusionists out there.
Yeah.
Or more. And that's very practical, meaning that Simon is just not interested. Sometimes you just have to push harder and aim higher.
Right, yeah.
to do something that feels fresh and original, and your audience can tell the difference. I think it became very common in magic for a while to say, well, it's not the magic, it's the magician. Doesn't matter what trick you do. It's both.
It is. It is. I mean, I was just talking with Chipper Lowell the other night about where I'm at, as a performer. And one of the things that every time I get on stage, I hate this, Mark, is that there's 2 or 3 routines I have that I've done for 10 years. And they've gone from being like an off-the-shelf magic prop to something that's unique and original, but it will never be unique and original because it's all based around someone else's idea. Does that make sense?
I think so. Like, give me an example.
Oh my goodness. A vanishing bottle routine.
Okay. I think that things like the vanishing bottle and the professor's nightmare and all these other things can happily coexist, but we must be pushing ourselves at all times to really do something special that we think is special, something we recognize and are excited about doing. And I don't think that has to be an entire show or an hour of magic. It really starts with 3 or 4 inspired minutes.
Right.
Where you just know going into it. And that's the other thing, is you said it's a very reliable standby. And you're right. You've put all this work into it, all this development, and you could only transform it so much.
Yeah.
So your next job, project, or task is to start with an original piece of material that hasn't been defined by somebody else. And that journey with a new effect can be very daunting, but oftentimes I find it's like a snowball. Once you start that journey and you start to discover and experiment and develop, it takes on a life of its own. It just exists.
I love it. When Katie and I first saw you guys live was at Carnival of Wonders, and I walked out of there, and I'll tell you, Mark, I walked out of that, and I said that was unlike any show I've ever been to. Not just any magic show. It was unlike any show because it took you on a journey. And what you're talking about here about finding original material and being yourself and all of these things, they take a show that people walk out of and go, oh, that was fun, that was interesting, to something where it takes people to a place where they actually were moved by it. What was that progression like for you? Because I'm sure when you were 17, 18, 19 and doing this, maybe the show looked a little different than it does now from a creative standpoint. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, your style has shifted since you first started. I didn't see the act originally, but I did see the pictures.
I've had many incarnations.
Yeah.
It's been an evolution. It's been a process of reinvention. But maybe we can go back and start with Carnival of Wonders is a good thing. It is. Yeah. It was a show that we produced that I still get a lot of magicians and I'm so honored, that say the same thing. They saw the show and it was the best magic show they've ever seen, one of the best shows they've seen. And I'll just say, for anybody listening out there that hasn't seen it or doesn't understand, what was really kind of different about Carnival of Wonders, and we still perform the show, so it still is, was that rather than just rolling on props and just putting tricks together in a concert style, we decided to sort of tie them together thematically. Mm-hmm. It started with the idea of a magic carnival, kind of a mystical carnival. And before long, again, it's like snowballed. It started to grow. The idea that, and this sounds very heady, but if you've seen the show, you'll understand that, a carnival is a great metaphor for life. It's scary, it's romantic, it's funny. You never know what's around the corner. And so we just took that as a framework. And I thought, okay. And again, it just sort of happened organically in a way. So let's see, we got to have a House of Horrors. We got to do all this stuff, and we'll have a Tunnel of Love.
Yeah.
Go into the Tunnel of Love, and that's where all the romantic stuff happens. Hobson, he's got to be the barker. In fact, Hobson can play all kinds of characters.
Right. Yeah.
And we'll provide the big moments, largely, Ginger and I. The other key thing that we started off with right at the beginning was it wasn't Mark Kalin and Ginger, the assistant, and Hobson, the comedy act. We really started out as Kalin, Ginger, and Hobson. That was the idea of the show. 3 distinct people and personalities. We each brought something very different to the table. And we would sort of, it sounds cliche, but take the audience on this journey into this little dark carnival. I had background in theater, so I just loved anything that was theatrical and scenery and lighting, and started to mix things that I, loved like that. Yeah. And the other probably most important thing, and there was the 3 of us, but the other, probably single most important person there was Joni Spina. Right. She was our director and a creative director, and she had already had quite a developed career all those years with Copperfield, and she was able to bring a certain, emotional quality to his stuff, and it just grew out of our relationship with Joni. Yeah, and the show had a heart. It had a little theme of life. The magic seemed to tie together and sort of make sense. And then at the end, the carnival started. The show came out of a little carnival bag in the beginning, and sort of
this is the greatest theatrical ending ever.
And then, and then at the end, the whole carnival disappeared back into that little bag, and I got to carry it off and say goodnight to the audience with a little tip of the hat. And I can tell you that I know when people saw it, I saw their reaction. It was like, how did they do this? How did this come together? In actuality, we only changed things a little bit. Yeah. It was remembered as greater because, again, magic had followed such a formula.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Just slightly off that formula felt fresh and new and different. And it made every moment of the show feel different.
Yeah, and you guys have continued. I mean, even looking back at Carnival, and I know you guys still perform that show, but even your show now is so different and has a different feel. And you talk about, recreating yourself as an artist. This is something that I think happens with musicians or, artists. A lot of people, they get to a certain level of success and they just do that thing for the next 60 years. And one of the things that has amazed me about you and Ginger is that you continue to change and to morph and develop your persona and your relationship on stage and the whole act and creating new illusions. How are you ever tempted? I mean, I see a lot of guys who get successful and they just go, well, okay, this works, I'll just do this. What is it that drives you to keep creating?
It's in my nature. Yeah. It's in our nature to always, and maybe the best way to explain it is to go back a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
We, for a number of years, when Ginger and I first got together, we had a lot of success with, another producer's show, Dick Foster, a show called Spellbound. That's where we met Hobson. That show was playing in Vegas, and it's what you would imagine as a typical flashy Las Vegas magic show.
Now, when you say it was Dick Foster's show, did he design what the show was going to look like, or did he find the acts? Like what?
In essence, it was not far different than what producers do now. He started with a handful of acts that he liked, an illusionist or 2 different illusionists, and then a comedy act.
Okay.
And then produce, production numbers around it, meaning just dancers, because you had to fill out the stage in Vegas, and the budgets were better back then. So lots of costume changes and pyro and and it was a certain time when the very flashy magic with exotic cats, which is what Ginger and I did. So we got cast in the show, and we basically performed our routines, fast and flashy magic. And Hobson did his comedy, and then interspersed were production numbers that really didn't tie into the magic, but filled the stage and were very successful.
Yeah.
And we were thrilled to be in it. But after a number of years, you're in somebody else's show, and you're working for them. So we were growing. Our ideas and our magic ideas were growing, and through it's the nature of the biz. They want you to be the same. They want you to slot into the show that's their vision. And you, just as you were saying, you look back at these material and you feel like you've grown past it or grown out of it. And so, yeah, it became harder and harder. It's like all of a sudden I realized I was wearing these really Vegas-y, sparkly rhinestone shirts that were, very expensive and made by the production company and looked good. But at some point it was like, oh, this just feels goofy. I feel like I'm a juggler.
Wow.
These silky sleeves. So, I would put on a simpler white crisp shirt, and, that would create tension with the producer. He says, no, you got to wear your costume. He's like, but I don't want to wear that. Yeah. But it's a natural process for a performer, because what happens was our roads were expanding, our concepts and our ideas and our belief in each other, Ginger and I. And then the fateful day when we had a show, and I knew that David Copperfield was in town, and I had heard Joni Spina's in the audience. And I knew who that was right away. Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. That's
Copperfield's director. She's amazing. She's, Yeah. So I was really nervous. We did the show. I after the show, I said, hi, what did you think? And Joni says, well, you guys were great. And never mind. And I go, no. Tell me. And Joni's not one. She was a person that always had the most amazing thoughts and feelings. It was never, how do I explain this? I just said, tell me. And she's like, well, if, no, you don't want to hear it. I go, I do.
I love it.
And then she said something. She said, well, and I have to add to this that Ginger and I had hit a wall. We had been growing, but we sensed there was something else out there, but we didn't know what it was. And we certainly couldn't find it in Spellbound, but we weren't even sure what it would be if we weren't in Spellbound. What would it look like? What is it we're missing here?
Yeah.
Where's the road supposed to take us? Where's our road to, excellence?
Right.
And Joni said something that day that had a profound effect. She says, well, both you and Ginger are performing out to the audience with a lot of, energy and razzmatazz. She says, but I bet if there were some times when you just did something that was between the two of you and you let the audience in on it, you'd really have something.
Wow.
And it was like somebody hit me in the head with a 2x4.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I think I understand. We started working with Joni like that week.
Wow.
We had a particular illusion that we'd done on TV with a Black Panther that was, and we started to work with Joni, and we started to work on this interpretation of the trick where we never acknowledged the audience.
Right.
It was between the two of us, and the audience was just watching. And Joni worked with us to make those moments real and authentic, and our physicality and our intention. And we ate it up because we were so hungry. And I realized that this was a road for us. This was a way allowing some sort of chemistry.
Right. You're bringing up something I've never thought about before in magic. In theater, there's this idea of breaking the fourth wall, that at some point you direct something to the audience, which in a theatrical production is unique because that's not the case. And so it has an impact because all of a sudden, you're touching the audience in a new way. But in magic, it's almost the opposite. Like what you're saying is there's never been really a fourth wall in magic. It's just all directed at the audience. And so you flipped that, and because you did something that, wasn't directed at them, all of a sudden it pulled them in tighter.
Exactly.
It's huge.
It was something unique to Ginger and I. There was chemistry between us.
Right.
We just weren't using it. We weren't channeling it. We weren't using the gifts that were ours, unique to us, because we were interpreting magic as we thought it should be done, as other people had done it.
Yeah.
Keep it fast, keep it flashy. If you talk to the audience more than a few couple of sentences and lines, it's going to be boring. What happened was that opened up floodgates for us. And at the same time, in a completely different way, we started to work on the Wakeling sawing, which at the time, nobody knew what that was.
Right.
That was an obscure trick that, by the way, when we first started to do it, other magicians said, "You don't want to do it. That's a terrible trick."
Well, it's such a unique piece, and for people who aren't magicians listening, it's a version of sawing a lady in half where what's great about it is the illusion pretty much just takes place in people's minds.
Correct. I've always said that it's the difference between a book and a movie. Most sawing in half tricks or tricks like that are movies. They spell it out. There's the happy girl in the red box, dancing around.
So excited to be cut in two.
Yes. And this is a mystery. It happens in your brain.
Right.
And it's all these great little clever, building a mystery one piece at a time. Or as a good friend of mine, Armando Lucero, who's got a great thinker in magic, performer, says it's about closing doors. The audience thinks it's this, and you close that door on them, and then they move a little over here and close that door. And then when you've closed all the doors, they're left with an experience of magic. And that was you can't really interpret a tiger appearing in a cage quite that way.
Right.
But a really good piece of material like the Wakeling sawing, something that is a challenge to a performer, it was a challenge to us. And we started doing it in Spellbound, and the producer hated it because it was long and slow, and we weren't good at it yet. We didn't have any jokes. But we sensed there was something for us. So here's what happened. We just knew when it was time to renew the contract, and we had a house in Vegas, and we were making really good money. We were performing on the Strip, and yet none of it meant anything because we had to do our own thing.
Wow.
Hobson was going through the same growing pains, and we said that classic thing, hey, why don't we do a show?
Yeah.
But what happened was we were so hungry to do something different and so passionate, so bubbling over with ideas. We kind of fearlessly, the show exploded out of us.
Wow.
And exploded out of collaboration with Joni and another great person, Jim Steinmeier, a great magic inventor and writer.
Yep.
He was involved. Add in a lighting designer and a set designer and driving passion to do anything but what we had been doing.
Yeah.
And you've got to sometimes trust. In fact, you always have to trust those passions and those, because it exploded. And what we ended up with, we were able to sell a contract in Atlantic City based on videos of our magic and Hobson's jokes.
Yeah.
And some designs. And, they were like, hey, how can you go wrong? Sure, we'll book you. We got a nice little contract. So we were back there. Now we had to create this show. And we were probably spent 2 or 3 weeks in the theater, and a great luxury, and piecing it together and making ourselves laugh. Let's do it like this. Let's edit the music like this. And I remember we were probably 2 days from opening. I think I said, gosh, I hope this is good. And Joni goes, I was trusting you that it was good. I was trusting you.
Wow. When did you know that you had something with it?
Almost immediately.
Yeah.
Like anything new, there was a period of time of adjustment and taking stuff out and slow spots and, tweaking. We had a lot of safety net there. because Ginger and I had been performing quite a few years as illusionists, and we had, if everything else fell apart, there was some really good visual, great illusions in the show.
Right.
And Hobson was brilliant as a comedian. So worst case scenario, if everything fell apart around it, it's not going to bomb.
Right.
We took a calculated risk, a creative push, but we built it on a strong base. We trusted our gut, and the show was well received right out of the gate. And we were supposed to do I think an 8 or a 10-week contract, and we got extended, and we did about 7.5 months, which was fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The time we were done, we had this show that was partially built and conceived and had video, and we knew what worked. But then a whole bunch of new ideas to make it bigger and better and funnier.
Yeah.
And, that's how you do it.
I love that I can see when you guys first put a piece on stage, and it's good. I mean, the moment you put it on stage, you guys have worked on it, and you've choreographed it, and you've, scripted it. So it's good from the get-go. It's where most guys would stop and go, okay, great, now on to the next thing. But what I love is every time I see you do it, there's another tweak and another tweak until it becomes this thing that is just completely original and unique.
I can tell you that I've learned just in the last few years. I'm going to tell you that I think what you're saying is true. However, I've learned that I think we polish things too much before getting it on stage. Here's what I observed. I mean, I really am a person that likes to polish stuff and work everything out and figure out every line and get it on stage and try to get it on at 80%. And then, over the course of the next 10, 20, 50, 100 shows, try to, fill in those gaps.
Right.
But I kind of feel like this time in the Illusionists, I worked with some other performers and acts that were a little more bold, a little more experimental, and I saw them progressing and learning and developing through that process with the audience, which if you're too precious about your rehearsals, something gets to the stage and you may miss some fundamental things. And I would say that I've made an attempt, and both Ginger and I have over the last few years, to be a little less safe and to try to get things out there. Very good friend of mine, a person I admire tremendously, a great magic inventor, Don Wayne, has said this. He says, you get something to the point that you won't embarrass yourself on stage.
I love that.
And that's really true, because until you hear what the audience says and feeds back. Now, I still think you've got to make sure it's a good trick. You've got to have your lines in place. You've got to but I think I have erred on the side of too safe for too many years and missed opportunities to learn some things. Or, sometimes you watch a performer and you realize they have a line or a bit or something that's just so brilliant. And you say, where did that come from? They say, I don't know. I was performing it one night and something happened and, mistake happened or whatever. It grows organically.
Yeah.
And you can only figure out so much, and the rest you've got to figure out organically. So trying to be less polished these days.
Yeah, that's great. What is it that you think keeps you from doing it? Is it just your own desire to have it be perfect, or?
Yeah, it's that magic thing of wanting to, you don't want to go out and be nervous. You don't want to screw up. You want it to be good, but you forget that sometimes you just got to get it out there. And when you get it out there, you've got to allow yourself to be experimental.
Right.
That takes an effort. You've got to say, okay, I've done 3 shows in a row. Sometimes we gravitate away because we start to feel like, it's starting to feel like a rhythm, and we stop experimenting. And sometimes you just got to force yourself and say, I did have this idea of doing it this way, or I do think maybe it'd be funny if I did this, and you've got to try it. You've got to take it out of that thoughts phase. Do you think it'd be good if I did this? What do you think? You just got to.
Yeah. And I think you and Ginger had talked before about you did some improv classes, right?
Yes.
That has been one of the things that's been so freeing for me. I've been taking some classes at a place called UCB in Los Angeles, And I love that on the, before you enter the stage, there's a sign on the door. It just says, "Don't think."
Yeah.
Obviously you didn't go out there without preparation, and you've studied and you've, put in the practice. But when you get down to the moment, just give yourself a little freedom to explore what could happen.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to perform as much as you can, any opportunity. And you've got to find an outlet to perform also where the stakes are not too high. Because sometimes if everything's really important or you're getting paid a lot of money for something,
oh man,
you're going to gravitate towards the safest route, which is what you do as a professional. That's why you're being paid. But you also need the ability where the stakes are lower, where you can be experimental and you can fail, and it's not going to be the end of the world. You've got to, if you're not willing to fail, you're not going to reach that level you're shooting for.
I have been so challenged by that lately because, most of my work right now, about 80% of it is corporate entertainment, which is a good gig, but
Yep.
I can't experiment with certain things like I'd like to. And what you're saying is find a venue where you can do that. What are some things you've done in the past to get out there and explore?
I don't feel like I have the outlet for it that I wish that I did. But I can tell you that certainly, and we've been very careful with it, but the Magic Castle,
right?
It's 21 shows, but they're very sensitive, and rightfully so, about magicians coming and experimenting.
Right.
As there has been a certain abuse of that, of people like trying out material that's not ready. They've really turned that place around when it comes to making it a quality experience, quality in restaurant, quality in the performers.
Right. Yeah.
So you've got to be very mindful. But when we're doing a week at the castle, we bring out all the best guns. We do everything we can do, but we try to save one little part that's insulated.
Yep.
All this other stuff, and get 21 shows and be really proactive. Don't be afraid to ask people you trust. Hey, will you come and watch the show? Can you give me notes? Do you mind coming and see the show again? I'm going to try that line you said that I should try. You might find it funny, but I spent a good part of today with a local newspaper here in Reno and Googling online, trying to find where there are some open mic nights in Reno.
Yep.
Because I have some stuff I want to try. Ginger and I have some stuff we want to try that is really experimental.
Yeah.
And it's not going to fit in even at the castle.
Right.
It's too experimental, and yet it's something we really think could be fantastic. So I've got to find a place where we can not be afraid to be rotten.
Yeah. Yeah. Give yourself the freedom to not have it be perfect in order to get there.
And to be really rough and experimental and have fun with it. And the last show I did was on the Palace Theater on Broadway.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for open mic nights in Reno, Nevada.
Oh, I love it. I want to talk about this because and we can come back, but I got to ask you, Mark. I mean, the show is about to break, and we talk about the highs and lows. And, I know if there's magicians listening, there's guys right now who are sitting in a one-bedroom apartment that they're barely paying the rent, and they're hearing that over the past few years, Mark Kalin has, you owned your own theater in Reno, you've toured Macau, you just were part of the Illusionists for the past 5 years, which is for people who don't know, the largest touring magic show in history. I mean, doing stadiums. And then you just completed a run on Broadway in the highest grossing magic show in Broadway history. And guys are going, yeah, Mark, it's great to talk about just being yourself. And you got to give us some insight into how you guys deal with discouragement or maybe sometimes where things haven't worked out like you had planned.
We're out of work right now. It doesn't change.
Yeah.
It's the nature of the biz. It's highs and lows. It's for every, triumphant, contract or moment on stage or brilliant, the trade-off is there's got to be 10 shitty ones.
Yeah.
Terrible experiences, disheartening, losing contracts. It never changes.
Right.
And number one, it's persistence. Ginger and I have been doing this a long time. We've had a lot of success, but we've had just as much or greater failure. It comes with the equation, whether you're looking at it financially or creatively.
Yeah.
In order to win, you've got to lose. It's never winning all the way. It just isn't. We've been on every side of it. We've been in that one bedroom. We've been tremendously in debt, as most performers are at one point or multiple points. We've lost out huge contracts. We've gone months at a time without a job or money coming in. And I'm not talking about 20 years ago. I'm talking about a year or two ago. It's part of the process.
Yep.
At some point, you just realize it's a roller coaster. You choose to get on that coaster, and there's going to be great exhilarating moments, and then there's parts where you think you're going to die.
Yes.
But what I can say is that what brought us to Broadway was hard work, focus, a relentless drive to do something better and be better.
Yep.
I don't think, if you'd even asked me 2 years ago, do you think you would be on a Broadway stage? Which, by the way, was the single most frightening, experience performing live.
A lot of times when you're performing a show like we do, you have audience members who don't go to the theater often, but then you go on Broadway and there's going to be reviewers in the audience. You know that this is going to be in the news and the newspaper tomorrow. What was that like?
It was a lot of pressure. It was because beside performing and having to look after our material and our material for Broadway, and we were, in many ways we were still developing the material right up until we were on Broadway. Ginger has this really amazing floating sphere that glows, and it's beautiful and it's original, and she's been working on it a long time, and it's gotten tossed out of the Illusionists twice, cut from the show. I mean, cut from runs, not just one show, but like you spend months working on it, you do it 3 or 4 days, and then we hear, we're cutting it from the show.
Wow.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And it constant pressure that your material is going to be cut or eliminated, or they're going to, but also I was working on the show. I'm the creative director for that show. So I had the pressure of holding the show together and working with the other acts and helping them be the best at what they do. So it was a lot of pressure, and being on that stage each night, I felt the weight of it. I have to say there was usually when you get past the first couple of shows, whether it's the Magic Castle or some big theater or casino somewhere or whatever, you get into a groove and you go, okay, now I got it.
Right.
Never quite happened with Broadway. Every time I stood center stage, and the first time the curtains would open, I would be standing center stage. And we're talking about the Palace Theater.
Oh, yeah. I mean, classic. Houdini performed there, right? I mean,
that 3 levels of tiers of a 1921 theater, and live music and an orchestra, and I'd hear the orchestra, and then those curtains would part, and I'm standing on this stage looking out at this packed house of 2,000 people on these tiers, and I don't know that I ever enjoyed it.
It's kind of like, you hear cast members of Saturday Night Live. They reminisce about it, how great it was, but while they were there, they just were devastated, like anxiety and what.
I thought one night, like Greg, a great football star.
Yeah.
That it's like the game's coming. They need one touchdown to win this game, and he's running down the field, and the ball's in the air.
Yeah.
And those moments where you're thinking, and then the glory is you catch it, and then, the crowd goes crazy. And I would say my entire Broadway experience on stage was like the part where before you catch the ball.
That's great.
Because you think nothing can happen. I can't drop a billiard ball.
Yeah.
I can't screw up a line. I can't trip. The tricks have to be perfect because these people have paid a lot of money.
Right.
And
Oh, yeah.
Alongside these other amazing performers at the top of their game.
Yeah.
So
wow.
It was a great experience, but there was a lot of pressure.
You're not only a performer, you're a creator, and you've designed and come up with pieces for other folks as well, and you're always, coming up with original material for your act with Ginger. In the midst of all the business of, maintaining what you've got going and the contracts and the show you're working on, what do you do to keep creative and to find the time to come up with new things? How's your process for that? Is there any structure to it, or is it?
I just love magic, and I've always got a million ideas. And, you said something earlier about, are you ever tempted to just do the same thing? Sometimes that makes more sense. Illusionists love to buy new props. And we had actually gone through a period where we hadn't developed anything for a while. This goes back a few years ago. And had ideas for things. And I'll tell you, what happened was I started to, as anybody does when they start to reach my age, you think, how many more years do I have in this business? Hey, how many more years do I have on this planet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Much less how much longer. And it was a kick in the butt to me because I thought, I've got some things that I have always wanted to do, certain tricks. I said, if I don't get them out there now, then they won't happen.
Yeah.
So the last couple of years has been a big creative push because I'm full of a lot of ideas and I want to get them out there.
Love it. And it all stems from the passion. I mean, we've seen guys who once were in love with it and now they're just doing an act. That to me is the saddest thing because it's the reason any of us got into this was because of the love of it. And the minute you lose it, the audience loses something,
Yep.
The show loses something.
I agree that I've seen it happen, and I've seen I don't know what I would do if that happened to me. I mean, I always am looking for what's next, what's interesting. I can't, maybe to a fault, but I don't know what would happen if I had lost that drive or that desire. It would be, I don't know. I've just always been trying to figure out what the next thing is.
Anything you want to do that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, I want to do open mic night.
I love it.
In the arc of things, I think Ginger and I have started on a later journey. We're older now, and I think we've known for a while where we need to go and what we need to develop to do magic that feels right on us as we get older. That nobody wants to, but that's difficult too because you build on a certain thing and a certain style and certain expectations in the business.
Right.
But we have been on a push for a while to develop a different style and something that will sit on us nicely over the next few years. And so that's what we're excited about, is exploring what that is. And as some of those things start to take shape, they're really rewarding.
I just love how forward-thinking you are. That sounds silly to say, but I do. It is so encouraging. I mean, I told Katie when we made the decision several years ago to go full-time in this, is I told her I don't want to end up being the guy who just does the same act for the same group of people for 40, 50 years. And
yeah.
I love that I told you this the other day, is that I feel like you get to this point where everyone goes, wow, look at that. They're at the top of their game. And then you find a new top somehow because you don't settle down.
There's a lot of bottoms on the way.
It's that roller coaster. You got to go to the top, then the bottom, then the top.
It's important to be inspired. It's important to inspire other people. It's important for me, it's important to collaborate.
Yeah.
I'm a collaborator. I really like working with people, and anything that's been great that we've done in our career has been a collaboration, not just with each other, but other great people. And that's what keeps, sometimes that keeps you moving forward too, is if you collaborate, there's a certain expectation that these people will put upon you that you feel sometimes you push yourself further. I've always said also, I think it's interesting that magicians have tricks and magic that they would never do at a magic convention or at the Magic Castle because they would be embarrassed. Because they say, well, you should never work for magicians. And I say, I think there's something about working for magicians keeps us on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
It keeps some of the hack lines out. It keeps us pushing to do something original. It keeps us from taking something out that might be borrowed from somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
Puts us on our best behavior. And I think that's a good thing.
What are some simple ways guys can collaborate so they can get around?
Yeah, collaboration doesn't require money. Collaboration is exactly that. Collaboration is just finding people around you that you trust.
Yep.
Finding people that are experts in their field. For instance, at one point when we were way back with Carnival of Wonders, I realized my costuming just felt a little funky for me. I didn't really have a sense for what it should be, or I should look a little sharper, but I didn't know. Well, we had a guy that was one of the dancers and actually a company manager for our show named Manny, and he was just always impeccably dressed with a great sense of style. And it's like every time he came to work, it was like, where did you get that coat? And and I just asked him, would you go shopping with me?
Yeah.
And of course he was happy to. And he did exactly what I want him to do. He says, no. Try this. Here's how it should fit. Here, put this shirt with it. Try this. No, Mark, I don't think you want to wear black pants, black shirt, and a black coat with a black tie.
Yeah.
So that was a collaboration. I would
great.
tell people that if they're looking to collaborate, check out your local resources like community theater or the university, where there's students and people that are passionate about what they do in theater. And oftentimes, you ask right and you ask humbly, or you inspire somebody, or you interest them with your desire.
Yep. And
keep in mind, you're intriguing to them. You're a magician. And there's a wealth of people and stuff around you if you just open up to it. One of the things that's difficult for magicians is magic, as it starts out as a hobby with us, we are kind of one man shows.
Right.
We do everything.
Yep.
We make our props, we go buy our costume, we go to the show, we set up our lights if we've got any lights. We edit our own music, we play our own music, we push play,
Yeah.
And that's how we learn. So that's how we feel safe. But of course, it also gives you only one limited point of view.
Yep.
And if you look at anybody in magic or outside of magic, but look in magic, somebody you really admire that's made their way up to the top, you'll see a very definite point in their career when they started to collaborate.
Yep.
Started to have other people come in that could do things better.
Yeah.
Could form, it's like the Beatles, they were fantastic on their own, but together there was something, unique and magical that came out of that collaboration. Totally. And so you don't need to go hire, a costume designer. But I can tell you that a really important thing that sounds like a strange thing, but a director just means a person with taste that you trust, that is out front, because you can't be there.
Right. Well, I did the castle a couple weeks back, and Mark worked with me on a piece, and it was one of these things where I was debating, do I even do it? Do I try it out at the castle? And I was at a point where I was like, I'm not gonna do this. I'm just not gonna do it. I was chickening out. I was the same thing you talked about earlier, editing yourself too much. And I had hit a wall with it. I just felt like I don't know if it's even good anymore. And in the couple days before I started the run, we had friends over for breakfast, and I said, you know what, guys, can I do a show for you? I said, I've been working on this piece. I just need to get your opinion. And I did it. And they had great feedback. And in a matter of about 20 minutes, it went from being something I did not feel like I could do to something I felt comfortable with doing.
Yeah.
And then Mark worked with me throughout the week, and I sent him video, and it just, by the end of this run, it became something. But it wouldn't have if that collaboration wasn't there. It would just
collaboration and give yourself credit, that pushing yourself, that going outside of your comfort level, and forcing yourself to do it in front of those people and then haul it to the castle.
Yeah.
And getting over the trepidation or the sense of insecurities we have,
right,
and rewarded with, something new, something that's new and unique, and you start that journey. And the other good thing is those journeys almost never stop. If you've got a good piece of material, it's never. So wherever point you made it at the castle, the next time you're at the castle, the next time you do it, you're starting from, that's your starting point, and it'll only get better from there.
So good, Mark.
Set your sights high and enjoy the process. It's not always about the destination. We spend 10% of our lives at the destination if we ever get it. The rest is all process.
Yeah.
So find the joy and find the reward and the challenge in the process and enjoy that. And the other stuff will come.
It's so encouraging to hear you say that, man, because I see how you've done that and how it not only brings joy to you, but also the joy that it brings to other people. And when you and Ginger step on stage, it really is. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it is magic. There is something unique that as an artist, I strive not to get the same thing, but to find the thing, my thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I remember watching, was it Hidden Secrets of Magic, where you guys did the Wakeling?
Yeah, one of our early performances.
Yeah. And I remember seeing you perform this piece, and you talked about magic having been fast paced and everything was, 3-second illusions and all of this. And you do a 6, 7, 8 minute piece. And I just remember watching it and going, there's something different here. And I feel like every time I see you get on stage, it makes me go, I'm going to go put the work in. So I appreciate you, Mark. I appreciate you and Ginger.
I'm honored to do this. Happy to come back anytime. And certainly if there's listeners out there that have questions, I'm always happy to answer them. It's not too hard to find me.
That's awesome. What's the best way for people to reach out to you? Facebook or through your website?
Yeah, Facebook. Mark Kalin on Facebook. Kalin at bestmagicshow.com. I mean, you know what? I get a lot out of passing on advice. Been doing this a long time, and if there's something that I can do that'll inspire someone or save them a little bit of grief along the way, happy to do it.
I have many times called Mark and said, Mark, what do you think about this? and
well, that's actually how our relationship started.
It is. Yeah.
And you know what? I'm going to finish this off by telling your listeners, because this is something that, I mean, we've been friends a long, long time.
Yeah.
But just what I said, having integrity, being humble, being gracious will open up paths. And I remember, I can't quite recall when it was.
Yeah.
But you had asked me for some advice or something.
Yeah.
Through our conversations, there was a certain magic trick, the hospitality, that you wanted to do. And I think you asked me, do you think this is a good trick? And I said, I think it's a really good trick. It's a pain in the butt. It's not easy. But it's a good trick, and it'll pay you back. And I remember, thinking, a very earnest kid, this Taylor, very nice kid. I'm happy to give advice and stuff. And then, I don't know, a few months later, the knock on the door, and it is the UPS delivery man, and he hands me this box. And I open it up. And you had told me that you were going to have your father make this prop for you, this beautiful prop.
Yeah.
I opened this box up, and here was one from you. And that was such an amazing, gracious, wonderful gesture that I don't know how many years ago, but that sticks in my mind. I still have that prop. I still play with it. But from that day forward, I was happy to help you out anyway. But that was such a wonderful choice that you made, showing your appreciation that way. That opened up every door for you with me forever. That's why when you said, would you do this show? It's like, absolutely. There's not even a second thought. I'd do it anyway. But so your listeners should understand that, and you should know that's the person you were then, that's the person you are now, and that will bring you everything you want.
Thank you, Mark. Being a kid who watched you guys perform on TV, who saw you perform live, who counted it a blessing to be able to get on the phone with you and have lunch with you, and you share every bit of advice that I needed when I was a hobbyist, and now as a full-time performer, think about these things regularly. I can't thank you enough. You're an incredible gift, and so blessed to call you my friend, man. Thanks for taking the time to do this. And
absolutely. And I can tell you that this is the part we're going to have to cut out because we're going to make your listeners sick.
I love it.
All right, man.
Mark, you're awesome. All right,
I'll see you next time I'm in LA.
We'll do it, man.
Right.
Looking forward to it.